to Making the Best of It, a daily video series helping you make the best of your time at home. Now today I am going to be talking a little bit about coronavirus or COVID-19. So if that's not something you want to hear about today, then check back later in the week for some more awesome videos. But if you're still here, I am super excited to share this very special episode with you. Today I'm going to be talking with you about what the DIB Lab has been doing to try to help out healthcare workers who are working on the front line of COVID-19. Now, some of you may have seen these kind of blue and yellow bottles in the background of a lot of my videos. And today I'm going to be explaining to you what those are and how I've been using them to help. Now, there's two main ways that I have been making PPE, or personal protective equipment, for healthcare workers: 3D printing and resin casting. I'm going to talk you through what both of those things mean and how they are helping. But first, I would really like to take a second to say thank you to the Wheeler School, whose amazing resources have helped make this project possible at all, and also to Andra Shea, who has donated some 3D printer filament so that we can make all of these things. I would also like to give an extra special shout out to Michael Shunny, who is an industrial technology teacher at West Warwick High School. He has been doing an amazing job of organizing this entire effort. So he has been taking all of these hundreds of face shield frames that I've been printing, attaching a plastic shield to the front, a bottom bracket to the bottom, and then putting elastic on the back, and then making sure that they get delivered where they need to go. These face shields have gone everywhere from Kent Hospital to nursing homes around Rhode Island. This group has filled requests for one face shield, an individual one just for one person, all the way up to over 1,000 face shields. So this is a really cool group that has just done such an amazing job of stepping up and doing the best that they can to try to help in this unprecedented situation. So I want to make sure that really everyone involved in all of our communities is getting a shout out for the work that they're doing. At this point, I've made over 400 face shields. So these are a very important piece of personal protective equipment for doctors and nurses and people who are in the healthcare field to protect them from the droplets that could get them sick. So let's talk a little bit about what a face shield is. So what I've been printing is the main frame of the face shield, and this goes on the head like this. Now, an elastic band is attached around the back so that it can stay in place, but you can see even without the elastic band, it does stay pretty well. Now, these three spikes off the front, they're made to have the same spacing as a 3-hole punch. So people have been taking pieces of plastic and using a 3-hole punch to punch 3 holes, and then a plastic shield can come down like this, and there's a little bottom bracket piece that gets attached right here. And what this does is it kind of puts a plastic barrier in between whatever is happening around the person wearing the face shield, so that little droplets can't actually get to their face very easily. So come with me to the basement and I'll show you where all 3D printers are and how I've been making a lot of these face shields. Welcome to my basement. This is where the 3D printing magic happens. So I took these two 3D printers from my classroom and moved them down here so that I can have them printing all the time. They've literally been running about 24 hours a day since I've been able to get them down here. Now, you might notice that these printers aren't printing just one face shield at a time. They're actually printing them in a stack, like this. Now, it's really important that I'm doing it this way because it means that they can run for about 10 to 12 hours straight without me having to get involved. Now, some people who are doing similar things are printing their shields without stacking them, like this. But for me, that doesn't really work out because one of these takes about 2 hours to print. And if you're printing them one at a time, every 2 hours you have to make sure you're right on time, coming down and changing it so the next thing can start printing. But since I'm always making videos for you all, running classes for my other students, and doing the normal things you have to do in everyday life, I know that I can't make it down every 2 hours to change the print I know that I can't get down every 2 hours on the 2 hours to change out the print. So printing them in stacks works really well for me. It does take slightly longer than printing them individually, but for me it's worth it. The reason why you can only print one at a time if you're not stacking them is because the face shields are so big there's not space to add a second one on the print bed. Now the other thing I want to show you all is all of the 3D print filament that we've used. So this whole stack right here, these are all empty rolls of filament. So those are ones that we've run through. I also have these two giant rolls of filament that are done. So each of these weighed 5 pounds. So this was 10 pounds of 3D filament that was turned into face shields. You can see that I have 2 more of those giant print rolls running right now. Now, if you're looking for a way to get involved and you don't have the time, energy, expertise, or access to technology, then one way that you can contribute is find a local organization that's doing this and see if there's a way you can donate things like 3D print filament to them. I know that everybody in the community really appreciates any support that we can get because this cause is really so important. 3D printing the face shields is just the first step in the process of getting these face shields ready to be sent out to healthcare workers. Once I have all my face shields printed, the next very important step is to have Sasha inspect all of the face shields just to make sure everything is all set. Once the face shields have all been approved by Sasha, I start breaking apart one side of the face shield using my fingers. This is a very important step so that I can do the next step where I'm actually breaking each face shield off of the tower. For this next step, I put on a pair of gloves just to be careful, and then I take a palette knife or paint scraper, slide it into the place where I broke apart the face shields in the last step, and then move it around the rest of the face shield to quickly and easily break one face shield off the top of the stack. The last step is to go through and take off any stray pieces of filament or anything that might be uncomfortable for the wearer. This is a long and fairly tedious process, but it is really important because these face shields will be worn for hours and hours at a time, and we need to make sure that they are comfortable for the wearer. Now, with a normal 3D print, you don't have to worry about having stray pieces like this, but because we are stacking these prints, it creates spaces where stray filaments or pokey, uncomfortable things can be created. Now is an awesome time to shout out my friend Corey, who is quarantining with me and has spent hours pulling apart hundreds of these face shields with me. Thanks, Corey! Now the other way that I've been making face shields is by resin casting. Basically what that means is that I take a liquid that chemically reacts with another liquid and I pour them into a mold, wait for them to harden, and then take it out of the mold. The result looks a little something like this. It's very similar to the 3D printed version, except I have no gap here, so I have a little gap here. There's no gap on this resin cast one. And there's also a little bit of extra fill in right here, just as a strengthener. Now the really great thing about resin casting is it takes so much less time, because I can make one of these every 45 minutes for every silicone mold that I have. Right now I have 4 silicone molds, which means every hour I can make 4 of these, which is so much faster than the 3D printed version. Now, with everything, there's always an upside and a downside. So the upside is it's way faster, but the downside is I have to sit there and mix and pour in the resin every time that I want to make them. So it does take a little bit more human power than just setting the 3D printers and forgetting them. Now, figuring out how to do the resin casting has been a little bit of a process. I first kind of stumbled on the idea because I really love to rock climb. And I built a rock climbing wall in my garage, and I found that rock climbing holds are really expensive, so I decided to make my own. And to make rock climbing holds, you do resin casting. And as I was experimenting with that, I thought, well, I wonder if we could use this to make face shields. And so I looked it up, and someone had done something very similar. And I tried it their way first. So this is kind of traditionally how it's done, is you take your 3D printer, whatever you're trying to mold or model, you press it into some clay so that it's like kind of attached on the bottom, and then you put like a little wall of metal around it, and then you pour your silicone in, and then when that cures, you pull it off, and then you get a mold. So I got something like this. And it was okay. You can see it's pretty thick. And I tried to do two at once because I thought I could maybe save some silicone that way, but you can see there's still a lot of empty space. And the edges of things just weren't very nice, and I was like, well, this does seem really cool, it does seem a lot faster, but I don't like how this turned out. And so I decided, well, I wonder if we can do this a little bit better. So my next try was to make this, which I've been calling my casting box. So this whole thing is 3D printed. So instead of just printing this, I 3D printed this whole thing. And this whole thing is made to be filled up with silicone, and then you can just peel away the silicone, and you'll notice there's this kind of funny bear shape in the middle, and that is so that I'm not wasting as much silicone, because there's only going to be silicone right around the edges. There's also this little empty slot right here, and that's kind of a little piece I can take in and out to make it easier to take the mold out of the molding box. Now, the mold for this turned out really well. And so did the resin cast face shield. But I printed this at 99% to make this fit on my 3D printer. And that meant that it wasn't able to attach right to the piece that goes onto the face shield. So my next step was to modify the casting box so that it looked like this, and I could get this mold out of it. Now, a friend in the 3D printing community really helped me out here and kind of made the modifications for me. And that, using this little mold, is how I made this face shield. Now, what's particularly cool about the resin casting method is that you don't necessarily need a 3D printer to do it. I, someone with a 3D printer, can 3D print one of these shells, one of these casting boxes, and I can give it away to somebody else, and they can make a ton of silicone molds and make as many face shields as they want. Or I can take my one casting box and I can make a bunch of silicone molds and give those out to a bunch of people. And as long as they're willing to buy the resin and they have the time to put in, they can make tons of face shields without really needing to have access to any other technology. So this is a super cool process. It's really a lot of fun. So keep watching to see how it goes.
To make a new silicone mold, I need the blue and yellow buckets, which contain the 2-part mix of the silicone. I need something to mix together those 2 parts. I need cups to pour and measure. I need my mold box and something to cover the ground. I also need to wear gloves to protect my hands. Once I have everything ready to go, I take the little extra piece of the mold box, fit it into place, and use some clay to secure it. Once that's ready, I pull out the 2 buckets of my silicone mix and open them up. Then I use these dippers that I made, and I measure out equal parts of part A and part B. Now, the great thing about this silicone mix is that it is actually something where you can just hold the cups next to each other and make sure that they're at the same level before you mix them. You don't have to weigh them or anything. Then I mix them up together in 1 cup and then transfer it back to the first cup to make sure that I'm getting everything all mixed in and mix it one last time. Finally, I pour it into the mold. Technically, you are supposed to hold it over one spot and just let it flow over the rest of it, but I always end up just kind of pouring it throughout the mold. Once it's all poured in, I tap around the edges just like you would with a cake to try to get some of the bubbles to rise to the top and pop so I have a nice smooth mold. This is my favorite part of the whole process, demolding the silicone mold. I take out the little extra piece of my mold box and then peel up the silicone. It's really easy to do. It comes right off and it creates a perfect negative of what was in my mold box. The only difference is that now I have a flexible version of it, and it's really important that the mold is flexible so that we can peel it away from the resin that is going to get molded inside without accidentally breaking the part. Once I have a silicone mold, I can start mixing up my resin. Now, resin is a lot less nice than silicone. Where silicone, once it cures, it comes off just about anything easily. Resin cures and it becomes extremely difficult to remove from whatever it is touching. So if you're ever using resin, be a little bit extra careful with it. Mixing up resin is a very similar process to mixing up the silicone. I want to take equal parts of A and B and then mix them together. Once everything is all measured and mixed, I can start pouring. Notice that as I pour it into the largest part of the face shield first, and that's because the more resin is in one place, the faster it cures. And what I don't want is for all of the resin to cure inside of my cup before I've had the chance to pour it. So I pour into the big area, then into the smaller areas, and then I go back and kind of use a popsicle stick to brush off any extra. Notice that we can see the resin curing. The parts that are becoming opaque, where you can't see through it, are the parts that are already cured. You can see that the front part of the face shield cures faster because there is more resin in that area, while the side parts of the face shield take longer to cure because there's a little bit less resin there. The other cool thing about resin is that it's an exothermic chemical reaction, which means that it releases heat. So if you were to hold your hand over these as they were curing, you could feel the heat coming off of them. Once the face shields are completely cured, which takes about 30 to 45 minutes, I can just pop them out of the molds by bending the silicone away from the face shield. There can be a couple of little extra pieces stuck to the face shield if I over pour the resin, but it just takes a second to pull those off by hand.
If you or someone you know is interested in getting involved in efforts like these, there are so many ways you can get involved. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you have, or look online. There's lots of different Facebook groups that are organizing, or other organizations you can try to get into touch with to see how you can help.